This is the P90. Now I'm seeing a lot of sceptical looks amongst your faces, so I guess a demonstration's in order. Who here is your best shot? Two out of three, not bad. Alice? And now demonstrate it on semi-auto. This is a weapon of terror designed to put fear into your enemy. This is a weapon of war designed to kill your enemy. Hello, it's Editing Kiwi here, just quickly saying yes, I know this video is really long, and if you're only looking for specific details, check the bookmarks below. Hopefully I will have a section labelled for something that you're looking for, and you can just jump to that bit of the video and watch the information you want. Other than that, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing and dropping a like and a comment on this video. It really helps the channel out, helps get the video out there, and hopefully helps inform more people before they buy things and learn about Airsoft. So with that, let's take one more jaunt through the old orifice and play the video. So today we're looking at this, the Cybergun licensed FN P90. Now I know what you're all going to say, oh Kiwi, you're just trying to jump on the bandwagon because there's new P90s coming out. Well, no actually, I've been rewatching Stargate recently and redeveloped a massive hankering for a P90, especially one with the integrated optic. So I had a look online and found this. Now I've been using it for a couple of months now, so I thought I would dive on in and share my thoughts and opinions of it. Before we do that, let's sit on down and quickly cover a brief history of the real steel version of the P90. So, the P90, what is it and why does it exist? An excellent question, Kiwi, and one that I shall answer you because you look frozen and cold and you forgot most of the key talking points while filming that section. It's a PDW, or personal defence weapon, designed in the late 80s and went into production in, let's guess the year? That's right, 1990. It's not just the weapon system that got designed, but also the round it was used, which is the 5.7x28. This is also used in the FN pistol, the 5.7, and the idea behind the round is that it's an intermediate round, so it sits between a pistol caliber round and a rifle caliber round, i.e. it packs more punch than a pistol and has more legs, but doesn't hit as hard as a rifle round. And the idea behind it is very similar to that of the M1 carbine of World War II, i.e. it gets issued to rear echelon troops or tank crews or air crews, so they have a backup weapon system because they aren't meant to be doing the heavy fighting, but if they need to, can still engage enemy troops and be effective against them far more than if they were equipped with just a pistol or a 9mm submachine gun. Despite its very futuristic looking design, it's actually very basic on the inside and uses straight blowback to cycle the bolt, i.e. rounds going that way, that forces the bolt to go this way and reload it. The most unique and interesting part of it is definitely the magazine. It holds 50 rounds, so it packs a hell of a punch, but the rounds face sideways to the direction of the barrel, and the last round in the mag gets spun 90 degrees before being loaded. Now that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, but the P90 by all accounts is a really reliable little weapon system. Now if you want to know more about the history of the P90 and NATO trials themselves, 9hole Reviews has done a very, very good video on it. I highly recommend checking that out, and no doubt there is a card popping up now saying go watch it. Now obviously with this being a cool space age looking gun, it has appeared in a lot of media. Starting off in the film and TV industry, we've seen this in Stargate with SG-1 using it as their primary weapon from the later series, and obviously all through Atlantis it was used. It's also appeared as marine weapons in Battlestar Galactica, and in the hands of various people in Doctor Who and Torchwood. Then, moving into the video game industry, who doesn't remember dual wielding these in Rust or Modern Warfare 2? Speaking of dual wielding, all the way back in GoldenEye N64, these appeared in wood believe it or not, as the RC P90s, which you could again akimbo wield.
Akimbo P90, real tiny face.
For me, the P90 is a very iconic weapon system. But that's enough talking about the real steel history. Let's move on over to the table, seeing as we're in the office, and see what comes in the box. And here it is, the Cybergun FN P90. I quite like the fact that the box doesn't have a big image of the gun on the top, although that being said, it does on the side. Other than that, there's not all that much information on it, just a load of warnings on one edge. But anyway, we don't really care about the outside of the box. Let's have a look at what's on the inside of the box. So, we are greeted by the manual. This is full of lots of don't do this, don't do that in many different languages. And flicking on through it does actually have some useful instructions. I'm actually really impressed with the quality of the English in this. It's definitely actually being written by someone who understands the English language as opposed to it being translated from some language without any understanding. Lifting up this foam layer reveals the internals. It comes in the box. Wow. In this one we have the original spring. This has been downgraded to UK limits. It came in a bit spicy, so that's been done, which is good. We get a speed loader, 1100 mAh 9.6 NIM, a basic charger with a European plug. Now, if I were you, I would take this straight away and throw it in the bin. You want to get yourself a decent smart charger, else you're going to have issues. Now, finally, we can look at the item of the box, and that is, of course, the P90. Now that we have the P90 out of the box, let's have a look through the features of it. And as always, we shall run from muzzle to butt. So, starting off at the muzzle, we have a P90 style flash hider, which is on 14mm counterclockwise thread, so you can take this off and for any sort of airsoft tracer or flash hider or suppressor to your heart's desire. Coming back from that, we have the mock charging handle, which is ambidextrous, so can be worked from either the left or the right side of the weapon system. It doesn't do anything, but it's cool when you go to do a reload, and yes, this is an empty mag, to smack that mag and rack that bolt. Coming up from the charging handle, we have the integrated sighting systems, and yes, I say systems, there are more than one. Obviously, the primary one is the integrated red dot on this. Externally, it looks like the integrated sight system on the real P90, although that is a 1x optical sight. This, however, is a red dot sight with a switch underneath with two positions for a low and high brightness setting. I found that sight to be very nice and easily allows me to pick up the red dot and engage a target. Now, I did say this was multiple sighting systems, so to either side of the red dot there is a small basic pistol style iron sights. So you've got one on the left and one on the right hand side of the sight, so that you can use it either left or right handed. Very nice inclusion, though in Airsoft, if your red dot's down, you're probably just going to point and shoot and watch the BBs as opposed to trying to use these crude iron sights. Flipping over, we see on the right side of the sight systems we have a small section of pick rail, perfect for mounting a flashlight or in my case scope cams. I kind of find it weird that they didn't include rails on the left side of the rifle or even mounting points for it, because that would have been nice so you can have multiple things mounted. But then again, for the most part, you're going to want a laser light module and that's about it. So moving down from the sights, we find the trigger group. I call it the trigger group because it is the trigger as well as the selector and safety in this area. So the trigger is very much like a 1911 in that it's a linear forward and back sliding trigger. And the selector is a drum selector that falls straight under the trigger finger. And again, P90, very ergonomic weapon system. It can be easily accessed by either the left or the right hand. What's nice about the P90 is that it's what's called a dual trigger. So in full auto, you can lightly pull the trigger and get semi-auto shots off, or you can pull it all the way back and get full auto. It's designed for a nice two-handed grip, with the front hand sitting just back from the muzzle and the rear hand sitting just forward of the breech. Very nice hold. A lot of people say it's a small weapon and too small for big people, but I'm 6'2" and I find it easy enough to use with my arms nice and tucked in. The shape of the grip gives you more of a kind of bolt action rifle grip as opposed to a modern pistol grip. Still, I find it very comfortable and very nice to use. One of the really nice things about this P90 is the join between the left and the right half of the body is not sharp where your thumb sits. I have used others where it's quite prominent and it wears and rubs the top of your thumb. However, this is nice and smooth and well put together, so that doesn't happen. So, moving back and up from the trigger group, we find the takedown button that allows you to take the receiver off of the body of the rifle. This gives you quick and easy access to your barrel and hop up, and allows you to have a look at your trigger group and make sure there's nothing jamming it up. Coming back and looking along the side of the weapon, we find an FN Herstal Belgium stamp on it, and nothing on the other side. And then coming back and down from it, we find the FN Herstal logo with licensed by FN Herstal stamped on either side of the weapon system. Now, I know this isn't perfect and isn't exact match to the real P90, but it's still a nice touch to have, and it still definitely looks the part. Now, directly above them we find our mag catch, which again is ambidextrous. So when loading, you just slap the mag in, and when unloading, you grab the mag and use your thumb and forefinger to push back, allowing you to lift the mag up and pull it out. And that works when you're shooting the weapon both left and right-handed. Hang on, I'm trying to do that left-handed. In, slap, thumb and forefinger, and out. With a little bit of practice, you can get very quick at loading and unloading the P90. Now, directly underneath the FN Herstal logos, we find the hop-up window, which is located inside the thumbhole stock. Now, it can be a bit tricky to open, and I really appreciate what Crytek have done with their P90, which is use the charging handle to open the window. But once it's open, it gives you access in to adjust your hop unit. Now, I can get my quite fat finger in there. I can definitely get my pinky in there, but if you're wearing gloves, it's going to be hard to do. Also, one of the things that really annoys me is they haven't marked which way is more and which way is less hop. Again, I would find that super useful to be able to see easily, oh, I need more hop, I'll turn it that way. Annoying pet peeve, but something I can fix with a little bit of Tipp-Ex. Now, working our way to the rear of the weapon, we find the sling loop point at the bottom of the stock, and just behind that we find the release button to take the butt pad off. So, let's have a quick look at the magazine. So rather interestingly, Cybergun decided to give you a mid-cap with the gun. Now, normally on entry-level guns you tend to see high caps, but I think this is a good choice going with the mid-cap because P90 high caps are notoriously complex and finicky and tend to stop working if you don't treat them right. So giving the player a mid-cap and a speed loader is an excellent solution to give them a reliable gun. The only downside is that this is really very close to being a low cap with only holding 68 rounds compared to the 50 rounds a real magazine holds. Overall, the construction is pretty good. The mock bullets look pretty decent. They've even gone and stamped or given fake stampings to the rear of the rounds where you do actually have stampings on real rounds. They've given it the ammo count markings and even put 5.7x28 down here on the bottom of the mag. I went out and bought some more mags so I could skirmish with it. This is a Tokyo Marui mag, so really kind of like your pinnacle of P90s, and there's really not that much difference in the quality of the mags. Sure, the TM has a bit more branding down the side, a slightly different texture to it, and it's got the fake spring in it, but overall they look fairly similar, they feed fairly similar, and in fact I found the Cybergun mag actually loads better. Some of the TM mags I've got struggle to actually load the full 68, they kind of stiffen up around 50-ish, so I've got no qualms there with it. One of the nice things about the P90 mag design is the semi-transparent look. So obviously you can see the fake rounds, but I've got the TM mag loaded. You can actually see the BB track in it, so you can keep an eye on your ammo count. And from the top, you can't really see it on the TM, but on the Cybergun one, you can still see the ammo track here. So when you don't see BBs in here, you know you're on your last, well, what was that, 30-ish rounds? So yes, it is a bummer it's not a high cap, but for me personally, I like that it was a mid cap, and I think the mid cap is the way forward. Now obviously the big elephant in the room when it comes to P90 mags is their awkward size. So here are the two P90 mags. There's a Stanag mag. So they're quite big. I got around this, I built a Stargate loadout. I got P90 pouches that fit and look like a Stargate loadout. But if you're trying to run this with something else, you're going to struggle to find pouches. Now obviously Crytek has just smashed open the P90 market by releasing their P90 with a 200 round mid cap. So that will make it a lot easier to carry a lot of ammo for your P90 and not many mags. However, I have no idea if they're going to fit and feed in the Cybergun. However, that is something I will check out, so stay tuned. I will find a mag, I will test it out and let you know if it works. Taking this off gives us access to our battery space, which sits here above the gearbox, and as we said earlier, it can take an 1100 9.6 volt NIM. So popping the wiring out and taking off this warning sticker, which is just going to get in the way, we can slot the battery in, hook it up, tuck in the wiring, and put our butt pad back on. So with a 9.6 installed, we get a very respectable trigger response, and we get a very decent rate of fire of around 15 rounds per second. That works out at around 900 rounds a minute, which is in the right sort of ballpark for the P90. However, I've been running this on my 7.4s and achieving around 11 rounds a second, but still a decent trigger response, which is more than acceptable for my style of gameplay. Right, so now we've had a look at the externals, let's dive on in and have a look at the internals. Now one of the nice things about the P90 is it's a very easy weapon system to take down. So let's start off by taking off the upper receiver by pushing the takedown button and sliding it forward and off of the lower frame. Now we can take the hop up and barrel out by simply pushing it in, twisting it 90 degrees and sliding it out. So having a look at the hop chamber, we can see it's a plastic construction rotary style hop unit. Note the top down feeding position for the BBs. Look inside the chamber, we find a slightly weird split nub designed hop rubber. So the BB runs through the middle of it and pressure gets put on either side of the top of the BB. It's a bit weird to see it in this price point of gun, but let's see how it performs in a minute. Looking at the other end of the barrel, we can see a nice deep crowning in the brass constructed barrel. That's good to see. That should help with keeping a consistent trajectory on the BB. And just behind that, we can see it's got a cutout for a stabilising O-ring. However, no O-ring was included with this barrel. So let's put that back in the upper receiver and look at the gearbox. To access this, we take off the butt plate, identify the two screws holding the gearbox plate on, remove those, and then hinge and slide out the gearbox plate. And with the plate removed, the gearbox should just slide out the back of the body. Now let's have a look at the gearbox. So first things first, it's a die cast construction, and we can definitely see clear swirls and grains in the metal. Not exactly the best, not exactly the worst. The interesting thing to note is this engraving here, which is, or this text cast into it, 06-01A. Now I had a bit of a look online, and that is the product code of the Cyber P90s. So I'm going to hedge my bets here and say that Cyber is the OEM of the Cybergun P90. So before we open up the gearbox, let's just have a quick look at the trigger contacts, because as I said before, the P90 has a dual stage trigger. Now instead of using fancy electronics to achieve this setup, they've instead opted for two sets of trigger contacts. So the first one is up here inside the plastic and looks very similar to your standard V2 or V3 contacts, and these provide the semi-auto function. So if we look on the other side, we have an exposed or an exterior cut-off lever. So I pull back on the trigger slightly so it looks like it's making contact, and then try and trip that bar, which is surprisingly hard actually. So if I trip that bar, you can see that trigger contact springs back, and that will give us our semi-auto. And then when you pull the trigger all the way back for full auto, you engage the second contacts, and even if you break the first contacts, the second ones down here are still in contact, completing the circuit and running the gun. I have heard people say that these trigger units break, but I've put several thousand rounds through this so far with the 7.4 and a 9.6 and I haven't had any issues, but I can see some darkening on that contact, so maybe a MOSFET in here is going to be a good shout. Right, so to get into the gearbox we first need to remove the trigger contact assembly, and that is done by taking out these 3 screws. Then this whole plate can be lifted off, the motor connector is disconnected and the whole wire harness taken away from the gearbox. This will then enable us to remove the further 2 screws which hold the motor cage in and take the motor off, leaving us with just the gears, cylinder, piston and spring assembly. Right, so the final steps getting into the gearbox are fairly straightforward. Simply take the top plate off of the gearbox and undo the final screw at the front, and then gently pry open the gearbox. I said gently. Let's try that one again, shall we? Right, so just tidied up the gearbox because it kind of all fell apart when we opened it. And first major observations is clearly Simon were sacrificing Smurfs this day when they assembled this gearbox. As you can see about the, quite frankly, excessive amounts of blue gunge they've used around the gear parts. So I won't do it yet, but I will clean this all out and re-grease this myself with an appropriate amount of grease. Now, speaking of grease, let's check out how well sealed up our compression parts are. So we're using a 3/4 cylinder, so we're not actually compressing until this point here. It's not the best. We're not getting 100% seal. There seems to be a bit of leakage. Occasionally we are getting a better seal, but it's not perfect. Might give these O-rings a stretch and a re-grease at some point. Now, looking at the piston itself, we can see this is a pretty much full plastic rack with the release tooth being metal, which is the bare minimum really. There are no shaved down teeth, so it's had no AOE correction. It's a fairly decent polymer. I don't see that breaking anytime soon unless we do some stupid build with this. Moving over to the head side, again it's a polymer head. It is vented, so that will blow the O-ring out to help give us a slightly better seal. And interestingly, it's got a thin, loose plastic disc, which I guess is meant to help guide it in the cylinder. I'm not really sure about that, but it's there. Obviously, the cylinder head is not a standard V2, V3 style, but is in fact a proprietary V7 gearbox design. So the nozzle is offset vertically up. There are third-party ones that can be used to replace this at some point if you want. Now, it's unfair to judge Cyber on the spring, as this was something installed afterwards by either the retailer I bought it from or the wholesaler who imported it into the UK. But what I can judge them on is the FPS variance produced when the spring is used in this weapon system. So for reference, I tested this with 0.28 and the hop set for them. I was getting 0.86 joules average as an output, which works out about 300 FPS on 0.2s, and then over the 10 shots the variance between them worked out at almost 0.1 joule, which works out at about 15 FPS variance, which is pretty wide. It's not exactly the best, and that is all down to the air seal, or lack thereof, in the compression parts of this gearbox. The spring guide itself is quite nice. It's metal construction with a bearing on it, so that will allow the spring to twist as it compresses and decompresses, and hopefully won't scratch up the insides, although that end will do a good job of scratching up inside the piston. And in fact, at the bottom of the frame there, we can see where it started to scratch away at the metal, and you can kind of see a ring being traced around the outside of that. It's not the best, but if I put a new spring in there, which I will be, that should help fix that issue. Again, this isn't a proper reflection on the gun because this was an aftermarket thing done by either the importer or the retailer. Now the nozzle is quite interesting as it's clear plastic, so you can actually see the cylinder head inside of it, and you can also clearly see that it doesn't have an O-ring. And if there was a decent air seal between the cylinder head and the cylinder, I doubt very much there'd be a good air seal between the nozzle and the cylinder head. So, coming back down to the gears, we've already covered the sacrifice smurfs in this. The gears themselves seem to be fairly decent MIM injection construction, so obviously they're not CNC cut, but they are pretty decent and will do the job. Cyber gears, by all accounts, are fairly reliable. They're definitely their V3s, their AKs and their G36s just seem to run and run and run. I don't foresee any of these gears breaking anytime soon with the current setup. But looking beyond that, the shimming itself is very basic. It looks to be just one shim either side of each gear, just to give it something to run on so it's not rubbing up against the gearbox casing. So again, there's a quick win for you if you want to do a quick upgrade. Reshimming this only takes half an hour and should improve your efficiency and the noise that your gearbox is generating. Now, the bushing in this gearbox are mostly proprietary V7 stuff, so especially the middle one that goes on the spur gear. Chucking the bushings in my calipers reveals them to be 6mm bushings, which isn't the best. It means you're probably not going to be able to get bearings to replace them, but they'll do their job, and in relatively low stress builds, which a P90 should be, you're not going to be building a DMR out of it, they should be fine. Admittedly, you might want to build a super high cycle gun out of it. A little bit of caution may be required when doing that, and possibly drilling out the gearbox case to take bigger bushings might be the way to go there. So jumping on over to the motor, it is a long type hidden inside this cage, and turning it, I can feel the clunks, but they're very weak as opposed to something that's got neo magnets in. They're very stiff to turn over, and just to prove that point, weakly attracted to that. If I switch that over to this one that even has an Allen key stuck to it, I can lift it up. So yeah, very standard basic motor, understandable. Again, it was a 120 quid gun. So another avenue for improvement there is switching out that with a better motor. And that's it, that's the internals. It's pretty basic internals, nothing to write home about. And a lot of quick wins there if you wanted to improve it yourself with a bit of tech work. For me, I'm going to be changing the spring out, re-greasing the compression parts to try and get the air seal up, and possibly replacing some of them to get the air seal up. Probably get a new nozzle at some point, and replacing the motor with a decent high torque to just improve the trigger response somewhat. But that's enough of that. Let's put it back together and see how it performs on the field. So now the part you've all been waiting for. How does it shoot? So we're here at the range. It's about 25 metres long. Down at the bottom we have a water canister and a cardboard box. Here's another water canister, so you can see it's about a torso size target, and the cardboard box is around a head size target. So I've got a mag full of blaster 0.28 gram BBs. I'm going to fire some shots at the water canister, get the sight in, and then we're going to move on up, try and do a 10 round group on the cardboard box. Now, I normally have a bench vise, I've got to pack it, so this isn't going to be as scientific as possible, but it's still a fairly good representation. Let's crack on. Right, I'm going to try and put some rounds on the box. Right, I think I fired 12 shots at the box, because 2 of them I I watched basically I fucked up. So, how did we do? Well, at this range, I was happy once I got my sights in, landing shots on the torso size target, and we got 8 out of 12 shots onto the cardboard target. So it turns out we can add counting to the list of things I can't do, because actually we had 9 shots hit the target and we had a 10th just below on the brickwork. We saw the splash. So that's 75% actually hit the target, about 83-ish% or 10 out of 12 hit very close to the target or on the target. And that was, there we go, you can see Google Earth there, it's actually 28 and a bit meters from where I was shooting to the target. So call it a 30-ish meter test. Out of this, with 2 8s, we're getting, in worst case, 75% hits on quite a small target. But anyway, it's all well and good saying, oh, I can do that on a range. How does it perform in a game? Right, so let's have a little look at the excerpt of gameplay from Camp Bravo in Eversley. First things first is we see me engaging a player at about 40 to 50 metres, and after a couple of shots I managed to hit them. Now, I wouldn't say this would be something I could do every time with the P90, but I just got lucky, especially with the amount of body they were presenting. After this we transition onto a target much closer in at about 10 or 20 metres away. I do manage to hit them as they throw a grenade, and by the looks of it they've been cooking it off before stepping out to throw it, because it went off very soon after leaving their hand. After that we then move on to another long engagement. I put a lot of rounds down, but the player didn't get out. They ducked behind cover and then continued to engage. Whether or not I hit them, don't know. But that just shows not every time you're going to reach out that far with the P90 as it's currently set up. Now we can see a reload, and I left this in because this was one of the faster reloads of the day, using 58 pattern as opposed to dedicated P90 pouches. Actually switching the mags in the gun, very quick to do. If you've got one in your hand you can still pull the second one out and slide your loaded one in, but then fiddling around getting your empty one into your pouches can be a bit of a faff. After the reload we can quickly see a transition from right shoulder to left shoulder to then peek that corner and do some more close-in engagements. So overall, I think the P90 is good for close to medium range engagements, so kind of your point blank to 30, maybe 40-ish meters. The red dot, once you get used to the ergonomics, is very easy to lift up and acquire and get on target. However, when you're trying to push it out a bit further, it can sometimes fall apart. I personally would prefer to have a magnified optic, but then again, the P90 is not designed for long range work, it is designed for up close and personal work. Which it did pretty well at. So what's the biggest drawback of the Cybergun P90? Well, for me it's the internals. They're just not that good. But to be fair to them, it's fairly easy to work on them, and I can do upgrades, and I will be doing upgrades. Most likely high torque motor, reshim the gears, probably replace quite a bit of the compression parts, new barrel and definitely a new hot rubber. That split bucking is meant to be quite good, but I never get on with them, and as we've seen, we're not getting the best accuracy out of this. But to be fair, at 25 meters, I was consistently hitting that torso size target, which is more than ideal for CQB scenarios, and in fact, I've done pretty well around our village here with this weapon. So it's not all doom and gloom there, is it? What are my closing thoughts on the Cybergun P90? Well, I think it's obvious. The internals aren't that good. The performance is okay, but not exceptional. But then again, for the price you pay for it, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make to get a P90 that looks how I want it to, i.e. with the integrated sight, because so many don't come with that. So if you're wanting a P90 that looks like this, whether it's for game nostalgia or to build up a Stargate loadout, I highly recommend having a look at the Cybergun P90.